welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Right, we're recording. Are you sitting comfortably?
Yeah.
Have you got your microphone in the right place?
Yeah.
Are you going to go like that so we can hear you in and out?
It's a fist, isn't it? You always say it's a fist.
It's about a fist away, yeah. It depends on your microphone. We've got very cheap ones compared to most people. So what the fuck's been going on then? Why haven't we been doing any podcasts?
You have. I'm the lazy one.
Well, that said, you did organise the last two people to be on it.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at when was the last one we did, which was Helen Lloyd.
Birds were singing, farmers were cutting grass.
It was that, possibly, was that last year or the year before? I'm just looking to see when it was. Posted June 2019.
You're kidding.
Yeah. She's actually written a book. I've done about 4 trips since then. You should definitely get a book. It's the Iceland one. She's a very good writer, actually.
Yeah.
I read one of her other books. She's lovely. She is lovely, and her writing is really nice as well. What's been going on? Why haven't you organised any more?
Because you're so hard to get hold of.
It is difficult, isn't it? I've had a fairly busy time. And so basically my wife's got a business in Kendal. Cable and Blake, Fabric of the Lakes. This week's episode coming to you. And her business partner died. So that's been taking up any spare time I've ever had. So that's part of the reason why.
So that's your Saturday job?
Yeah, pretty much. And Sunday. And then I have a full-time job, 3 children and 2 dogs. Ridiculous. I've got almost as many children and pets as you have motorbikes now. Ashley was hoping that you'd bring a puppy today. It's down south. My wife, that's a bit Freudian, has taken it to see her mother, who is unwell. Oh dear. That's kind of my excuse, and life is really, right, it's hectic as well. And like you say, I've recorded 7 other podcasts for work, pretty much in that 6 months. Yeah. And it does take a lot of time as well.
To do the podcast?
Yeah. So there's there's half a day for us just to sit down, set it up, record it. Yeah. And then you're looking at about 5 hours to go away. And
I always thought you used to do this on the train as you were travelling.
I did, but I'm driving to work at the moment.
It's not as easy, is it?
No, not really. It's not ideal. The police take a dim view, as do other motorcyclists. I'm not on my phone. No, sir. You appear to be on your laptop. I think if we were actually better at doing it, and maybe we will get better at doing it, that we don't have to do so much edit, because a lot of people will just record.
Do you feel any sort of guilt
publish
at all for the sort of the 5 people that have subscribed to this? That have been...
It's literally more than 5. There's literally lots, literally several people. Well, we do get some feedback, not a lot. Yeah, but as people,
you say feedback.
Yeah, well, people do like it. There's maybe 8 people have responded and said, when's the next one coming? Or
but surely they've given up now.
Probably, but it should. Once we publish this next one, it should just pop up into their feed and they'll automatically see it.
Right.
And also the effect it has as well is if you put a new one in, then the numbers for all the other ones go up as well because people spot it. Yeah. But we should definitely encourage people to share it amongst their trail riding buddies. Yeah. Mind you, we're not really doing it we do it because it's kind of fun, isn't it, really? Yeah. And also, we've got our first sponsor.
No.
Yeah, we have. No money involved, obviously. But yeah, Hippo Hands.
Yes.
Has really good quality, what they're called?
Tested to destruction by Greg Villalobos.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing. We get offered 20% off. Yeah. He falls off his bike, kills Surprise, puts a hole in one and gets offered a free one, new free one. Yeah. So that kind of puts us in our place, really. Yeah. But yeah, Hippo Hands are the original motorcycle hand covers, and each pair is made in the USA using quality craftsmanship and materials.
Do they come from there, America, or
they do? Yeah, you have to buy them from America. I don't think there's a UK importer. Maybe we should do that.
Import Hippo Hands.
But I am going to get some. Yeah, I'm going to get some. They do 4 versions. Yeah. Greg got the shorty ones. I'm going to get the Rogue ones. Yeah. because they sort of stand up nicely. They're not cheap.
See, this
but they're
is just like AC/DC all over again.
You're going to have to run that past me.
Everyone laughed at me listening to AC/DC when I was at school.
Okay.
They're all listening to the Jam and the Stranglers.
Yeah.
Now everyone loves AC/DC.
I
And it's exactly the same with Muffs.
Well, I'm not a big fan of AC/DC, but you're absolutely right about Muffs. Or maybe it's just because we're men of a certain age.
Yeah.
Like a bit of comfort. But yeah. No, they were invaluable on that last big tech trip we did.
Yeah. I think one place we're not going to need Muffs this year is northern Spain in July.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
It's going to be horribly hot.
Yeah, that's better than getting rained on, isn't it?
Definitely a string vests and knotted handkerchief trip.
Although I do remember one road trip we did with Mr. Hill, and we were in France, and it was absolutely hammering down, really miserable, and we kind of looked over the mountains, and it was blue skies on the Spanish side.
Yeah, in horribly hot Spain.
So we rode over the top, and it got to the stage where the tarmac, it was like we were completely drenched. We rode over the top of the mountains, and we stopped on the Spanish side, and it was so hot that my bike nearly fell down because the side stand dug into the tarmac. It's just incredible. That was a while ago.
So it is going to be horribly hot, seriously, though, isn't it?
I'd hope so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. If you're moving, you've got a wind coming, haven't you?
Yeah.
And I'd rather be... I don't like being hot, but I'd rather be hot than wet and cold.
You might be both.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweaty. So do you think we should carry on then?
Carry on.
Doing the podcast? Try and take it more seriously.
More seriously than this, even?
Well, do it more often.
Yeah?
Don't know, one a month could be a target, couldn't it? That should be achievable.
Yeah.
People could suggest guests.
So your recent one that you did with the...
Well, yeah, this is
TRF
really
men.
this is what's kind of got me back into it, really.
But are you putting it out on this, or...?
Yeah, to let people know what it is. Steve Stout, our good friend, riding buddy, and he's now the chairman of the Cumbria TRF. He's very, very active, does a lot of really good stuff. Our worst possible podcast, because the sound was so bad. But, he's the one that raised 20 grand and rebuilt the old coach road, and he's doing a lot of great things in Cumbria for trail riders. He instigated this scheme. He basically knows all the guys in the TRF, and some of these guys have been riding since the 60s and the 70s and still riding. And he said, we need to capture.
Well, he's obviously been talking to them and just thought this is gold, isn't it?
Some of the stories they come out with. Yeah, I think that was his, just chatting with them in cafes or whatever. And they come out with some amazing stories, and he suggested we capture them. Yeah. So it's kind of his thing, really, using our kit.
Yeah.
And we're going to release them through the TAMP.
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
They're amazing, those men.
Well, we've recorded the first one last Sunday, and and you've listened, I think it was brilliant. Some of the stuff they're coming out with, and some of the stories are great. I think what we're going to do is release us talking nonsense as part of one single podcast, because we've got about 35 minutes worth of stuff from them. So if we do half an hour today...
It's interesting to listen to their stories, isn't it? Because it's those days when everything went tits up and somebody got washed away down a river.
Yeah.
The days where nothing happens aren't that memorable, are they? It's
like all the...
bad hotels.
Yeah, it's all the difficult stuff that gets remembered, all the funny stories. But I love two of the guys, Steve and Roger, and between them they've got, 50 years worth of trail riding experience, so absolutely brilliant.
And are they still riding now?
They are. They both still ride. I think they're on they're very much the light is right brigade. They ride small bikes, and I think they've been down Steve told a story where he got you'll hear it in about half an hour. He tells a story where he started off on a small bike and ended up getting one of those big old Yamaha 500 things. Yeah. Completely unsuitable certainly for trail riding in the lakes.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Last time I saw him, he was on a lovely little TLR 200.
Yeah. And I think Roger rides something similar now as well. But I'd imagine they're dead good riders as well.
Yeah.
I don't think you lose that with age necessarily.
No.
So we're going to carry on then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got a couple of things lined up, which I guess we probably shouldn't talk about until
they actually happen. They are actually happening.
Well, this one's happening. This one's happened.
Oh, you don't mean podcasts, not trips?
Yes. Well, do you want to talk about the trip that we've got Well,
Yeah.
which one of your 8 trips you've got planned this year?
I went from no trips to 3 trips in the space of about a week and a half.
Aren't they all going to the same place?
Yeah.
Go
But
on
not
then.
all of them involve a 2-day ferry crossing.
Yeah, that was a bit.
I haven't even dared. So our mutual friend Greg has organised the ferry. And we found out after he'd organised the ferry that we would... and this is the one-night ferry I've been talking about for years.
Yeah.
Oh, we should definitely get the one-night ferry to Spain. It's fantastic. You leave in the afternoon. You arrive at midday.
But he didn't book the ferry, did he? He booked a fucking cruise.
Yes. So it came out that he's actually found somehow in the depths of the internet the 2-night crossing / cruise.
I think it was probably the cheapest one, wasn't it?
Yes, I think we're going via Guernsey, Roscoff,
Yeah.
and anywhere else.
I think we stop off and there's a crew change.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to adjust your attitude. And
I haven't even dared ask about the return trip.
I am fairly certain that's just a
One night?
one night. Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Great.
So what about your other 2 trips?
So I'm going away with my dentist,
Yeah, as you do.
who's become my good friend, and another client of his who's now become my good friend. And we're going to northern Spain again.
But you're doing pretty much exactly the same trip, aren't
We
you?
are. But
And you've already done it.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference there, isn't there?
There is a big difference because one member of the group does not want to stay in a tent and likes a nice hotel. I'm sure everyone likes a nice hotel, but not everyone is sort of brave enough to go away and commit to just staying in hotels. I love it because I was once coming back from a trip with Ashley and we met these 2 blokes on the ferry coming back from Roscoff, and they had very little luggage, but they'd obviously been away on a big European trip. And we said, and we'd been camping and stuff. And we said, where have you been staying? And he said, well, we stopped for lunch. That sounded great to begin with. We stopped for lunch.
In a restaurant,
Yeah.
presumably.
And we just have booking.com on our phones and we just find somewhere to stay, work out where we're going to be in sort of 5 hours' time. And then we just ride to that location. And I thought, oh, this sounds amazing.
It does.
What's the
If you
downside?
it's more expensive. Right?
That's the big downside,
that's the thing.
isn't it?
But would you necessarily? I suppose you could do both, couldn't you? If you could afford it,
Yeah.
do both.
Yes.
If you want to go and do the rough camping on the top
Yeah.
of a mountain, then
and that's
you can
kind of
do
what
that
I've
as
done
well.
with Ashley, really. But we've sort of camped and then stayed in a hotel and then camped and done it alternately to make it more bearable. So this trip is purely,
Hoteling.
it's a booking.com trip.
That's going to hurt you, isn't it? You're going to have pain every night when you book into a hotel that costs more than £8 a night.
No,
You're going to have physical pain.
We're going to be in rural Spain. The options are going to be limited. No, it'll be fine. It's pretty cheap to stay in places in Spain, I think.
You're not convincing me. You're just trying to convince yourself.
No, it is.
Because you're so
Yeah,
tight.
it's not far off
No, you'll be fine.
what you might spend. I don't know. Anyway,
Good.
but it's going to be a luxurious trip because, we'd have to carry all the gear. But this is the next hurdle, is getting people to stop carrying gear. Because it's very hard to go away and not take all the little things that you're used to taking away on autonomous trail riding trips. So I'm determined to go away with a pair of shoes, 2 pairs of socks, virtually nothing, a tool roll, and that's it.
I think it's not that difficult because basically you do 2 or 3 trips and then you actually empty your bag at the end of the trip and you realise, I haven't worn those things or I haven't used that thing. It's not coming next time.
Yeah, but there's still the paranoia about fuel and tools and spares.
Yeah, but you
that
don't.
never leaves you.
Yeah, I suppose tools and spares, but the fuel thing isn't an issue anywhere in
Not
Europe,
at all.
is it? Really?
No, it's like riding from here to Hawes. You'll pass some petrol stations.
Just
somewhere.
take a half litre or a litre bottle with you, and just if somebody runs out, you can
Yeah.
go and fill it up.
So I've got that trip at the end of May, and then hopefully going away to Germany. Now there's been some debate about this, about whether Germany would be a good country to ride.
Is this
through.
with Ashley?
Yeah,
Mrs. Tom?
because it doesn't get talked about a lot, does it? Riding from
but
here to Berlin.
we've done road trips through Germany, haven't we? And it's
lovely.
for the wine region,
Yeah.
and I can't remember the names of the valleys, but it
suppose
was lovely.
You get so used to going to Europe in search of mountains, don't you? So the thought of going to Europe. So initially, I was really keen for us to go to Switzerland or Austria,
Yeah.
but we know sort of people dotted about in Germany. It'd be quite nice to see people. That'll make a.
So you're going to
for a
ride
great
into?
trip.
Did you say Berlin? Then you're going to ride into Berlin and
as far as there, and then go north maybe, and
it's a
come
city
back
break.
across the top.
You've changed
Yeah,
hotels, city breaks.
and then the trip with you in July.
Yeah, That's another Villa Lobos production, isn't it?
Yeah.
Messing around with cameras.
But it's interesting that we have a WhatsApp group to satisfy between now and July.
It has been fun. I don't know if we can keep up 80 messages a day for the next 4 months. But we've got 2 new friends, haven't we?
Yeah.
So Greg has got to know Adam Mitchinson from Rally Raid and Will. I don't know what the Will Linson connection is. I think Greg just really
He's a bin man,
his.
I think, in Cardiff.
Something like that. Yeah. That's how Greg knows him. So I think Greg just really likes the films and things, photography that he's done, and has got to know him through that. I think they've done some bike testing together for Adventure
he does some
Spec.
excellent drone work.
Drones.
Mm.
Yeah, but they're a lot younger than us, aren't they?
They are.
Do you think we're going to have to learn how to wheelie and go really fast?
And this is the big quandary, isn't it, about which bike to take?
I don't have that quandary.
Why are you raising your eyebrows?
I really don't have that quandary.
Because I was hoping this was going to be, because I know Will has a big bike. He had a big BM. Didn't he have a big 1200 or something?
Big 1200
so I
GS.
thought, this is great. I'm easily going to be able to keep up with these young men who are saddled with these huge behemoths.
Yeah.
But then Adam especially, who probably has a choice
Adam's
of bikes.
got the choice of, yeah.
So everyone's now talking about taking faster and faster bikes.
Well,
I've only got you. You're my anchor.
Yeah, well, in so many ways. Well, I don't go fast, as you well know. Well, Greg's going to be on his... Is he talking about either the...
He's going to be on a T7 or his CB500.
his own CB500.
Yeah. I'm really encouraging him to go on his 500.
Because Greg does go fast.
He does.
That's probably why he falls off so much. But Adam certainly looks like a good rider, doesn't he? He can do wheelies and everything.
Yeah.
And in the videos that I've seen, he seems to go quite fast as well.
Yeah, Will's good.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Maybe we'll certainly be at the back.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll be in a cafe somewhere.
Send us the GPS coordinates of the
We'll
campsite. We'll see you there.
But it is, it's been quite good fun, hasn't it, planning. And I don't know if they've done big trips before, but there's all that excitement of getting kit and stuff.
Yeah. It's going to be odd talking to people for months and not meeting them until...
Well, I think we need to go down to Rally Raid and have a bit of a... Because Will lives quite near to Adam, so I think we should go down there, do a podcast.
That's an excellent idea.
Go out for a beer as well.
Yeah.
Say hello. Let's do that.
Yeah. So your bike, what have you done to it?
Well, I'm very slowly, every month I've been buying a new ruggedized Rally Raid part for my bike, just so it's...
Your CB500 bike.
Yeah. So I got that in March on credit.
Yeah.
So I've got the belly pan on it, I've got the handguards, I've got the shorty levers, I've got the footrests.
But you're not going to go the whole hog and do wheels and suspension?
Well, I might do, because I'll get some bit of a bonus from work in March, so I might go a bit mad and just do the low-level suspension one, which just upgrades it, doesn't make it any taller. And the wire wheels make sense to me over cast wheels, because they flex rather than break. So if you break a wheel, you ain't carrying a spare wheel.
It's a whole new wheel, isn't it, of course? It's, I realise it's not just a hub.
I suppose you could get it welded, but not a great idea.
No.
So I might do that. It's not cheap, but we'll see.
It's tempting when you see Greg's, isn't it? Greg's looks fantastic.
It does look proper, doesn't it? Yeah.
Looks great. Feels great.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah. And I've got my 11-pound Lomo pannier bags. They work really well. So people are spending literally hundreds and hundreds of pounds on side racks and...
Do they feel like Ortlieb kind of quality, or...
No.
What, not as good?
No, not as good. I think the material's thinner. But to be honest, I'm actually thinking of buying another one for £11 and
How do they
keeping it flat in the bag spare.
How do they attach at the back?
I just put two ratchet straps on them.
So they've got loops or something to thread?
Yeah, they've got loops in there. Yeah, designed for motorbike usage. So I've got some Endurostan ones on the back and then two 20-litre side ones on as well. That'll do. And
the racks are made by...
I don't have a rack.
You don't have a rack?
No, I don't need a rack. Yeah, so I've got these Shad. They're a Spanish company I've never heard of before. Rear kind of they do top boxes and panniers. So I've just bought the sidebars for the top box, but made my own carrier.
Ah, you said you'd made... I thought you were joking when you said you'd made your own.
It's like, well, you buy a piece of like 4 mil thick aluminium. I just cut it to shape and drilled the hole so I could fix it to the Shad carriers, and that's it.
So what's that bag? Is the bag touching your side panels?
No, because it kind of rests between the seat and the I don't know what those bars are called. But anyway, yeah, they don't even flap around.
They're just
so
like grab handles for...
Yeah, it's like the grab handles and the bars for the top box. So that works really well. So it's cost me about 120 quid for a full setup. And I went to Harris, 2 up, with all the camping gear with that setup, and it was fine. So it's cheap and functional.
Well, you've definitely saved enough to buy a full set of wheels and suspension.
yeah, maybe not. We will see. So what riding have you been doing recently?
Just local rides out, really. We had a little ride, didn't we, out with Greg in Northumberland?
That was a lovely day, wasn't it? And a brief
lovely
spell of good weather a few weeks ago.
My bike really suffered from the brief venture out into the salt.
Did it?
Yeah,
Did you not wash it?
Yeah, I washed it as soon as I got back, but it just, like, bits of water settled in the rims and stuff. It was so annoying because it was a brand new rim. But apart from that, just a few rides out on my red Honda on the XR.
I've not been doing a lot.
We went over to Coniston one day, which is the ride we used to do years ago, and now it's been upgraded out of Tilbury, between Tilbury and Coniston.
When you say upgraded?
Surfaced. Unbelievable. Thousands of tons of materials gone into it. Well, you say, oh God, it's a funny one because, yeah, it's not as hard as it was, but the roads, it's quite nice to see the road in great condition.
Okay, I suppose so.
Yeah, it's a funny one.
They sorted the drainage out as well, because that was the main, problem.
It was a knackered track, really, yeah, and all the drains are in it now. So, yeah, it is good.
It's good.
But it's totally, totally different.
And you've added some bikes to your Honda museum?
Yes, kind of. I bought an Africa Twin.
When you say you bought a Africa Twin, singular, you bought 2 of the same bike?
Yes, because it was a bit of a revelation, the first one I got. It was. I've kind of obviously known about Africa Twins forever, but never really realised exactly how great they would feel to ride.
That's the logic. It's really good, so I bought another one. You can't ride 2 at once, can you?
Why did I do that? I bought one that was a really high mileage one.
And you saw another one that was really cheap.
And I thought, this is great, but it's not going to last forever.
Okay.
Well, it will last. I don't know. I just thought...
How many miles has it got?
A nice one. 92,000 miles.
Right.
Of commuting, I think.
Yeah. So you probably get...
And then I just saw this other lovely one that had come from Greece.
I
just thought I'd really like a nice one. Originally, I did think I would sell the high mileage one and keep the lower mileage bike. But now, as soon as I brought the really nice condition one, I suddenly realised I am never going to drive this through a muddy puddle. I need to keep the old one. And then I put some work into the older one and raised it and did some stuff to the suspension. And so now I'm thinking, well, actually, I need the off-road one.
Are you going to keep them both?
And the road one. I would like to do a European road trip.
Right, on the good one. On the nice shiny one.
Probably, yeah.
So what, you're completely Honda now, aren't you? You've got no BMWs anymore?
No.
Completely Honda.
Yeah, that's not going to change now, I don't think. No, I need to get it down because there's too many. I look at Greg and you've quite happily survived with 2 bikes.
Well, I've got 3 actually, but one's in bits. And it has been for years and years and years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one of them's not even on the road at the moment. It's my KTM. It needs servicing. Carb needs cleaning. Fork seals need doing. Yeah. Chains and sprockets.
So aside from this trip to Spain, you don't have any other plans for a bike trip this year?
No, that's it. Well, when you get 25 days a year holiday, it's quite hard to actually get 12 days away on your own without the family and the children. In fact, I'm going to buy an extra week's holiday so it doesn't impact our family holiday too much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll keep going with the dog thing. You could go on like a dog sled holiday and have more in the winter months.
My 2 fucking dogs are so stupid. They'd eat the sleigh rather than pull it.
What have you called your new puppy?
It's called Eddie.
How's the dog training going?
He's cracking little fella actually. He's a lot of fun. He's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Mental. But yeah, he's all right actually. He's almost house trained. He's only like 12 weeks old, and he's actually first thing in the morning you let him out of the crate because obviously he's still chewing. Yeah. And he will just run to the back door to go out for a wee, which is pretty good at that age. But the Otis and Eddie Otis just hated him initially. I think he was unwell actually. He was on antibiotics. It's snowing. It is snowing.
Wow.
It's like I'm staying here for the week. And he hated him and just had nothing to do with him, kept growling at him, but now they're bosom buddies. Yeah. And they sleep in the same dog bed and things like that. So get in there. Should we do a dog podcast? You're going to get a dog. So anyway, this podcast was all about really just kind of a catch-up, an introduction to the Cumbria TRF Steve Stout production of the history of Cumbria TRF, which is coming next.
It's funny. It's a story that you'll hear all over the country, won't you? There'll be old blokes from all over the place that have stories to tell about trail riding.
Yeah. Well, you say old blokes. Steve actually wants to talk to you about your experiences of riding when you were a kid.
Yeah.
With all your...
I don't think that would work.
What?
Because my riding was so localised, with me talking about riding a bike down the field,
right,
that we're looking out at now.
Yeah,
we really go beyond that too much.
Okay. We'll tell him no then.
I do have a bike washing away story, but again, it was only about 4 miles away.
Did you get it back?
Yeah.
Did you get it going again?
Yeah.
My name's Steve Stout. I'm the chair of Cumbria TRF. What we're trying to do here is capture a bit of an oral history of trail riding in Cumbria. Cumbria TRF started around about sometime in the 70s, and we'll get a bit more detail on that in a bit. So it's trying to get those histories from the late 60s, early 70s through to 2006, which is when the Natural, Environmental and Rural Communities Act of 2006 came in, because that made huge changes to the network of what was legally available to ride in those days. With me, I've got Roger and Steve, long-standing members of TRF, so I'll let them introduce themselves. Roger.
My name's Roger Harris. I've been riding bikes since I was a child and started riding trails, etc. when I was 16 in 1961. Joined the TRF in 1978 and was group rep and other things for many years until recently.
Okay, I'm Steve Pighills. I was brought up at the top of Kentmere, and I rode things like NSU Quicklies and Royal Enfield Flying Fleas up there on the roads, maybe up to the top of the Longsaddle Pass and around the valley, but never, of course, thought that it was anything like trail riding. Then had to go away down to the Midlands and get married and all that sort of stuff, and didn't take up motorcycling again until a stroke of fortune through redundancy got me a trail bike in 1977, at which I joined the TRF. I'd already got it sort of in the back of my mind from reading magazines and so on, but bought a DT 175 and started trail riding then. Most of my trail riding, because I lived in Dudley, that sort of area, was Derbyshire, Wales, Shropshire, etc., etc. But of course, since my parents still lived at the top of Kentmere, I came up with motorbikes on the back of my car all the time until, I suppose, my daughter moved into the house in 1990. I was still coming up. And 2003, I moved up here to live. And from then on, of course, nearly all my trail riding has indeed been in this area. I'm the Rights of Way officer for Cumbria TRF, or at least one of the Rights of Way officers.
And maybe I should introduce myself as well, because I'm probably going to interfere at some point. So I'm Clive Barber. I've been a member of since about the year 2005. But yeah, I live in the area too, and I ride an awful lot in the Lake District. But I got my first trail bike in 2005.
Just in time for NERC.
Yeah, I managed to go over, what's one of the big passes that got closed down? Walna-Scar. I did Walna-Scar about 4 times on consecutive weekends just so I could ride it before it was closed down. It was a great route, wasn't it? That said, we've still got good riding around here. Probably the best in the country.
So Roger, what was your first bike then? So what got you into actual trail riding?
Well, when I was 16, I was an apprentice motor mechanic, and my father bought me a Recover Tiger Cub road bike, and with the help of my friend Tom, who'd just come out of national service, and he rode trials. He bought himself a new Tiger Cub. We converted this plunger-sprung Tiger Cub into a trials bike, and we would go anywhere and everywhere over the fells. Just to fancy a ride out over the fells, mate, and we'd just go. And anywhere, Nambiel Pass, we went many times. Got some funny stories about that one. We just, Barbendale in particular, that was a favourite. And we just rode over the fells. And then I rode in trials, Westmoreland Motor Club trials. I did scrambles, I did grass track, and then stopped riding. I got married in 1971, so I sold the 4 bikes I had. I sold for a mortgage and a wedding ring. And then about 4 years later, my great aunt died and left me £250, and that was quite a lot of money in 1976. And that bought me a Montesa Corta trials bike, so I did a couple of years trials. And then in 77, I heard about the TRF, and I was losing interest in competitions. I had 2 little sons and a lot of money, and so I joined the TRF, and here we are, all these years later, riding with Cumbria TRF.
So just to clarify then, in the competition stuff, there was trials you mentioned,
Yeah.
there was scrambles,
Yeah.
and there was...
I did grass tracking.
Grass tracking.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
Grass tracking, let's be
Well,
like speedway.
all 3 of them. Just give me a...
All right. Well, trials, you'll understand what trials are. Western Motor Club trials were exceptionally good in those days because you got a really good ride out over the fells, not a multi-lap Mickey Mouse thing that we have today. You actually got to ride, maybe 50, 60 miles, 1 lap, sometimes 2. Notable one really for me was the Sporty Boys trial. That was brilliant. That started at the Jungle Cafe, which is now Kendal Caravans on the A6 towards Shap. And it was split into a morning run, which was observation in the valleys to the right. So Breast High Road, Breatherdale, those valleys where there were observed sections. You then returned for a very quick snack at lunchtime, and then we went timed an observation in the afternoon, so you had to go flat out. And that was, I've forgotten the name of the valley, and I've forgotten the name of the hill, but we ended up north of where the start was, and we ended up near, what's the valley?
That's that dead end valley with the farm at the end.
Well, eventually we ended up almost on Gatescarth Pass, and we dropped down into Longsleddle, and there was observed sections in Longsleddle Valley, and then back to the finish. And that you got an award if you finished that. That was like a mini Scott trial. It was quite something if you finished. So I did get a finisher's award in 1965, I think it would be. So that was trials. I didn't do many other clubs. It was mainly Westmoreland Club, local stuff. And then Westmoreland Scrambles just down the road here, Helsington. They had a good course there, really good course there. And the first scramble I did was on my trials bike. And then I got a Greaves, 250 Greaves, various other bikes which I won't bore you with. But
No, bore us with them.
right, well, I started by encouragement from Tom on my little Tiger Cub, rode in my first scramble down at Helsington here. And then I thought I liked this. I like the speed and everything, so borrowed some money off my dad and bought a 250 Greaves motocross, square barrel Greaves, and ran that for 2 or 3 years. And I was good enough to make the finals. I was good enough to finish well up in the heats, but I wasn't physically strong enough, and I hadn't the stamina to do a long race. I tired, and I suffered from what these days they call arm pump, where my hands were locked onto the handlebars. So the biggest event in the area was the Cumberland Grand National on Easter Monday, which attracted a lot of works riders. And so we had Jeff Smith, Arthur Lampkin on the BSAs, and we had Dave Bickers on the Greaves. He was world champion at the time. They were all there, and good course as well. Anyway, they had a race for Northern Centre residents only, and I got a good start. By this time, I was on quite a special bike. It wasn't the Greaves. I saw this bike advertised, and I thought, I fancy that. So again, good old dad lent me the money. It was a Dot, which was owned by the works dot rider called Bill Baru from Clitheroe. He was top man at the time, and of course Dot had an association with Villiers engines, and they were all Villiers. And he'd fitted a BSA 350 B40 engine into this Dot, and Dot told him to get rid of it. So he put it up for sale, and I bought it, and it was a cracking bike. Anyway, I was riding in the Northern Centre residence race, and the 2 top riders in this centre were a lad called Tony Sharp, who's not with us any longer, and the other bloke was Bob Dickinson. Now, Bob Dickinson was fantastic on a big Gold Star. He could ride a big bike. Tony Sharp on a 250 Greaves and latterly a CZ. And one by one, people either dropped out or I overtook them, and they ended up in 3rd place. And I couldn't believe what I saw coming down the hill, this hill section. Tony Sharp and Bob Dickinson, who hated each other's guts, knocked each other off. And I passed them on that second to last lap, and I won the race. And I was stood in line for my trophy with Dave Bickers. It was highlight of my life, that. So, scrambling for a few years, Bassenthwaite was another good track, which they're just resurrecting, I think. And another friend went grass tracking, Graham Wilson's brother Maurice, who's no longer with us. Maurice is one of the top riders in the north of England. And I went with him to Lincolnshire to this grass track. And I thought, yeah, I wouldn't mind a go at this. It looks good, this. And there was a bloke selling his bike. He was emigrating. And there was probably 8 of us had travelled from Kendal, and everybody went through the pockets and gave me all the cash that they had in their pockets, and I managed to scrape up about £50 as a deposit on this bike. And this bloke was very trusting because the bike was like £200, and I gave him the £50 and he let me take the bike, and I brought it home and I sent him the money, and I had a couple of years grass tracking, not with the success of Maurice or Graham Wilson, but enjoyed it, really enjoyed it. And then back into trials, and then marriage, and then along came the TRF in 1977. I heard of them and joined in 78 and thoroughly enjoyed it. There was 16 members at the time. I think there was about 4 or 5 in the Carlisle area, because David Howe lived at Mealsgate near Carlisle, he ran it, and the other members were in Kendal. And it was good, really, really good stuff. I made some good friends in those days. And literally, we were probably riding illegally. We were probably riding a lot of bridleways, but no one bothered in 1978.
At that time, Steve, this is your area. Was it 1949 that they passed the act which started to say there was footpaths, bridleways and then roads of various kinds?
Yes, it was when the National Parks Act, when the National Park Acts came in. Sometime around that time, each parish basically had to tell them what the routes within that parish were, in consultation with the local authority, I guess. So the parish meetings would sit round and say, oh, I think that should be a bridleway, or I think that's probably only a footpath, or I don't want any buggers coming through my place, so it'd never be more than a footpath, etc., etc. And they introduced, again, timing is all there, but I can't remember it exactly. There was a third category which came in, which was road used as public pathway. And that was the thing that was there to dump all the routes which were considered to have higher status than a bridleway, i.e. motor vehicles could be capable of using them, let's say. But it was a sort of rather grey thing and didn't disappear until, I guess, byways became yet another category. Or another category beyond that. You
mentioned earlier that your first bike and stuff, so can you just give us a bit more detail on that bit?
Okay, yes. Unlike Roger, I had no competition background whatsoever, and just took up riding and trail riding as an interest. I probably in the fairly early 70s made the dreadful mistake of not lying sufficiently to my wife, and I ended up buying a Vespa when, for about £100 more, we're talking 45 versus £145, I could have had a TS125 Suzuki. Because of that, I lost about 4 years of trail riding until redundancy, money, and a DT175, which at the time was as good a trail bike as you could possibly have. It wasn't, without modification, an enduro bike, but it's a absolutely mint type of trail bike. Bought that, 77, same time as Roger was starting his trail riding career, and joined the West Midlands TRF, which was a very sort of formal thing, met in a sort of army type, ex-army meeting place, and we all sat round a table, and the chairman had a gavel which he could bang on the table, and so everything was done in a real formal way in those days. I started trail riding with the West Midlands Club, and my first trail ride ever was somewhere down south of Stratford in the middle of the winter in the snow and ice. Got photographs, the odd photographs showing that run, and the run ended when we were on our way home when another newbie, we were going through a very, very long ford, and if you kept to the left-hand side, it was about 18 inches deep or a bit less. But if you went to the right, it was about 3 or 4 feet deep. And this lad went to the deep bit, got himself out and said, "Oh, I've lost my bike. That's the end of the bike." Oh. People said, no, we can just about see it. It's floating because of the petrol tank. And they got everybody's belts, tied them to the bike, pulled it to the shore. He was soaked, his bike wouldn't go anymore. What that ended up with me having to do, because it was the end of the run, was in the dark and miserable weather in the winter, follow the car with the trailer, which my bike should have been on, but now his was, into Solihull, and go home. I should have stopped trail riding then. It's just, you'd never been so cold, miserable in your life. But anyway, carried on with the TY175, trail riding with the West Midlands Club. When I came up here, I brought it with me.
Is that still the same bike you're riding now?
So I said TY, I meant DT175. Sorry, I should have been saying DT all the time. No, I did bring it up here and rode it up here some of the time, but a year later, of course, with this illusion that a bigger and more powerful bike makes you ride better, I chopped it in for an XL 500S, which is a twin-shock Honda with a 23-inch front wheel. 23-inch front wheel. Somewhere around there are indeed photographs of me taking that over gates. Well, I didn't take it over gates because someone else took it to the top and I slid down it. It was on a very, very wet day. It worked better once it had a 21-inch front wheel with knobbly tyres and things on it. But with that, I started trail riding up here much more, but it was almost always with groups from outside, or our group from outside. It was a long, long time before I got myself with Cumbria TRF. And the riding which I did up here, bearing in mind that I was based in the West Midlands, was mostly us as the West Midlands group coming up and riding in Cumbria. I think that's what a lot of the other groups who came up into this area did as well. The Cumbria group, from looking at old magazines, was very sensitive to this because it meant people were coming into the area in relatively large numbers without much control as to what they were doing and where they were going. I think I broke that routine about once, really, by meeting up with Roger or Peter Dealey at an executive meeting, or the annual general meeting might have been that, and asking if they could provide me with a run leader. And they provided me with this guy called Reg Turnbull, who took our self-designated rather hard West Midlanders out around the area on his TS125 and wiped them into the ground. Don't know whether he was he a trials rider, Roger?
No, he'd never done any competitions at all. He was just a natural trail rider. He was exceptionally good. He could go anywhere at quite a pace if he wanted to.
He did have a very small, light bike, and he was a very tall, gangly sort of fellow, so he could probably have run with the thing almost as fast as most of us could ride. But anyway, having used the guide once, I have to admit that we carried on. I suppose the West Midlands, we probably only came up here once a year or whatever. We moved into going into Yorkshire quite a lot. And I would come up to visit my parents in Kentmere on Friday night and then nip down for a Saturday or Sunday ride, probably from somewhere like Caton through the Yorkshire Dales. So we, in the end, began to quarter most of this area. Don't think we ever went out into the Alston type thing. That was a bit too far from Dudley or whatever.
So what time period was that?
Probably the early 80s. And to get some sort of handle on the sort of attitudes to rights of way in those times, prior to the 70s and prior to the government and getting the national parks to try and get definitive rights of way onto maps, footpaths, bridle ways, RUPPs. I'm not quite sure whether byways actually were one of those. I think
the byway existed then.
Byway didn't exist. No, I think you're right, Roger.
No.
There was a period of anxiety, I think, with the TRF in the late 70s and early 80s, when you certainly wouldn't go riding over Nanbeeld, and they were getting very concerned as to about where they would be able to ride at all. A little later on, there was a case somewhere in the country where it was established by some exceedingly learned judge that once a road, always a road. And this meant that if you could prove that a horse and cart had used this track in 1732, it was still a road and you could take your motor vehicle, a motorbike, on it. So having gone from the period of complete freedom, really, because of everybody's ignorance in the 60s and 50s, 60s, and so on, and maybe early 70s, it got through anxiety, an anxious period probably in the late 70s into the 80s, until this thing occurred that once a road was always a road. It's very nice. It means you can go where you like, but it doesn't mean that the landowner will agree with you when you say that it was once a road, and it's often quite difficult to prove. We used to have to carry things around with us when we could do. You had curious situations such as when you reached a parish boundary, an RUPP, a road used as a public path, became a footpath on the other side of the parish boundary. And you'd go to the block and say, no, it's a road all the way through. Look, I've got this map from 1865 which shows it is a road all the way through. It's not so easy to persuade someone that is true. But I guess from the 80s, early 80s through till NERC in 2006 was almost a golden period, because we could ride more or less wherever we wanted to, as long as we could demonstrate that it had been a road at some time.
1978, David Howe was running it. As I said, there were no indoor meetings. The only way of contact was to phone him or write to him, and he was very, very competent, very good. Unfortunately, he only lasted a couple of years, and he and his wife went off. I think it was a voluntary service overseas they did, but we'll ask Robert, because Robert knows more than I do. So they disappeared, and Peter Dealey took over as group rep for a couple of years, and Pete Dealey's still around, so I'm going to go and talk to Pete, because he was in it a year before me. He was a good group rep, but that's all we had in those days, a group rep. We did start indoor meetings for the first time, 79, probably 80-ish, round about there.
Can you remember where that was?
Oh, yes, I've got a list of where we used to meet. We started off in Kendal, I think about 1980, and we met in the Golden Lion pub in the marketplace in Kendal, which no longer exists. It's Cafe Nero now. Then we moved to, I've forgotten the name of the pub, but Bonus on Windermere at the bottom of Cragbrow. The landlord, a lad called Peter Steen, was a motorcyclist, so he was quite hospitable, although he didn't trail ride. So we were there for a few years, and in those days, there were probably only 6 people at a meeting, and it got to an all-time low, and I went round and picked up 2 friends, and Alan Todd, who we'll talk about later, and took them to the meeting. Without that, there wouldn't have been a meeting. That was how low the numbers got in those days. And then it began to pick up after that. We moved to the Duke of Cumberland Hotel in Kendal. We were there for quite a few years. And then there was a sudden upsurge of members from Barrow-in-Furness area. So to accommodate them, we moved out to the Derby Arms at Witherslack. And we were there for a few years. And then that changed hands and we were made not welcome. So we moved to Gilpin Bridge Inn at Levens, and we were there for quite a few years, and the landlord there was very hospitable. He was really into motorbikes, and he came from Keswick, and we had a really good relationship with him, and in fact we put on an evening talk by Austin Vince. He came and gave us a talk. I met him at Devil's Bridge, brought him up here. He went on Radio Cumbria to publicise the evening event. He had lunch with us, and then you put him up overnight, Steve, didn't you? Quite a character, Austin Vince, quite a character. Yeah. The landlord at the Gilpin Bridge had to pack it in. New owners did not make us welcome at all. They didn't even clear a room for us to use, and we just got the impression they didn't want us there. So I said to the landlady one night, we're going to move because you're obviously not wanting us here. So we moved to Bluebell at Heversham, and that was when we met you. And that was for a few years until that closed for renovation and down to the Cross Keys as well, you know.
And now the Bull's Head.
Yeah, and now the Bull's Head. So that's all the places we met.
So during that time then, Roger, you were obviously trail riding quite a lot. Once a week, once a fortnight?
Initially, at least once a week. But as the family came along, 1980-ish, my first son was born. So there was just my wage as a motor mechanic. We hadn't much money, so I didn't ride very much at all, once a month, because I was one of the few run leaders that there was available at the time. Prior to that, I'd ridden every week. But we did get one or two lads who I think rode too often. They would ride twice, 3 times a week, and eventually got fed up of it, and we never saw them again. But it was down to once a month for me at one stage, and there's some quite funny stories I can tell you later that happened on those runs. So I'm not sure of the timeline, but Pete Dealey was group rep for at least 2 years, if not 3. And I don't know why he stood down, but a lad called Colin Thompson took over for 1 year. Colin was a much younger bloke. He was a salesman for Lakeland Green Slate at Skeleth Bridge. And there's a very funny story I'll tell you later involving Mike Harding, the Rochdale cowboy bloke, and Colin Thompson. So Colin did it for a year. Then I took over until recent times. But things developed. We developed from just having a group rep to having a chairman and a rights of way person. The first one was Cliff Brown, did it for a few years, quite a few years. And then after Cliff, Stephen Brass took over the rights of way until Steve Piggles arrived on the scene and Steve took it on. So we've had 3 in that period of time. We've had 3 rights of way men. And it got more professional, you might say, when Steve took over and more involved. There was a lot more issues than there ever had been. As I said earlier, we were probably riding quite a lot of bridleways in those days and no one bothered. And it just got, well, it got more sensitive even before NERC. Larger groups coming up. And we did try through the magazine to say to people, would they please ring us and tell us they were coming? Better still, we'd probably provide a run leader just to try and keep an eye on how many were coming where and when, because it was starting to get out of hand. It was too many, too often, really, for the lakes. It was a big problem, and there's a few stories involving CCM, which I can tell you about later as well. Created all sorts of problems for us, CCM. So those were our meeting places. I can't remember what year it was, but I started going to annual general meetings, which, as Steve has said, we probably met there for the first time in Birmingham for the annual general meetings. Unfortunately, I lost a lot of paperwork when I moved house, but as Steve has said previously, we can learn a lot through the magazines. There's quite a lot of good information in the magazines. So we had a monthly meeting, we had a monthly run. That was something we did. Well, as it happens now, people do their own thing. Little groups go off and do their own thing. Nothing wrong with that at all. But what we did was, we always met, I don't know why, but we always met on the second Tuesday, right from the very beginning. And the ride, the club run, was always on the following Sunday. And what we did at the annual general meeting is I produced a sheet with the months on, the area to be ridden, and the runs leader. And the runs leaders were filled in as we went along, month by month. But the purpose of that was we would then cover all of the area at least once a year. We would ride all of the Yorkshire bit that we ride now, plus all of the Lake District at least once. So the whole of the area was covered by doing that format. And it worked quite well. We got enough runs leaders. In latter years, we haven't had many runs leaders. People don't volunteer like they used to. It's not as easy going as it used to be. So that was the format. We'd had club meetings. We had a club run the following Sunday. Communications weren't good, of course. There was no mobile phones and such like. Things we did, quite a few things we did, which you're trying to resurrect, Steve, I think. We did a voluntary lensman scheme. We did it on our own bat. We also did it in conjunction with the National Park Authority. We had a tools training day, and I've got some photographs there of the tools training. And the first lane that we did the work on was Ickentwaite, those big puddles on Ickentwaite. And the farmer didn't like us doing that. He wanted the puddles left alone because he didn't want it draining off into his land. But anyway, that was the first one we did. We had working parties, some really big working parties. We had some enthusiastic members like Edwin and Stephen Duckett, and there was a farmer from Natland called Anthony Hayhurst. And now Anthony could do the work of about 4 men. His hands were, like huge, strong lad. And we did a lot of work on Gatescarth, northern side, putting set stones in. We worked on Sadgill quite a bit. I've got some photographs there again of working parties on Sadgill. So we did a lot of that, with or without the National Park. Some of it with. The National Park Ranger for this area was Sue Thompson. She was very good. She worked with us quite well. Another thing we did was we had motorbike trials for trail bikes. And we ran those in the 80s and 90s on some land at Crook. A lad called John Crow, who lives at Winster, organised them, and they were very good, well attended. There was probably 25 riders. We had the odd barbecue afterwards, and then, I can't remember why, but we moved on to Edwin Duckett's land, and we ran, for about 3 years, we ran trials on Edwin Duckett's land on Falton Knot, and they were well followed as well. We had runs for 2 up, wives, children, partners on the back. They were quite well attended. We had beginners runs. Over the years, I have seen so many people come to trail riding and they found it too difficult, too strenuous, and you never see them again. So we did half a day to start with, just half a day, because if you're inexperienced on the types of lanes, and I chose easy lanes, but nevertheless, over the years, I've seen dozens and dozens of people come to join us and disappeared and never to be seen again, because it's not as easy as they think it is. So beginners runs. In the 1980s, we had 3 women members, 2 rode solo and 1 pillion. One was Tracy McGrath. She's no longer with us now, bless her, lovely lass. She was a teacher. She taught science at the Lake School. Lovely, bubbly personality, lovely lass. Her husband John rode as well, of course. He's still around, doesn't trail ride. And her friend, whose name I've forgotten, rode solo. And then we had a husband and wife team who are still on the go but don't trail ride, from Sebber, and Paul and Audrey Carr. And Paul latterly had Honda Dominator, and they could go anywhere. Believe me, they could go anywhere on that bike, and you struggle to keep up with them. What a competent pair they were, really, really good riders. Yeah, so there's some good stories from those days. So that brings us up really to NERC and the present situation, really. I'm sure I've missed something out. My memory's not as good as it was. At one time, I could lead a trail. I could lead a trail from memory. I didn't need a map, although I always carried one. And I knew the name of any lane. If it had a name, I would know the name of it. And over the years, it's just gone. I've just forgotten them all. I've forgotten the area. And some of those photographs have reminded me of some of them, some incidents that happened on some of these lanes. There's some really amusing incidents and some serious ones. I don't know what year this was. It would be 1980s. And I don't know why to this day, but we had the February run based at Alston. Can you imagine choosing a month like February to go riding in Alston? But we did. For some crazy reason, we met in Alston. We met in the old railway station yard there, and there would be about a dozen of us. Robert and Jeff Wilson came up on their R80 GSs. A lot of us trailered up there, but they came on the R80 GSs, and there was snow on the ground. They were still skiing up on Moss. They were still skiing up there, and there was a bloke on a CZ road bike, and his footrest stuck out this far, literally, and he struggled through snowdrifts, but not as much as the Wilsons with those BMWs. We dragged them through snowdrifts on Colbury End. There's another name for Colbury End, isn't there? It's from Teesdale to Weardale, England's highest road.
It's the highest green lane, yeah.
Yeah, it's the highest green lane, highest road in England. What's its name? Colbury End and something else.
It's called Colbury End.
I think that's its proper name.
It has another name.
There are 2 names
I've got
for
that name somewhere.
Yeah. Anyway, we dragged them through these snowdrifts on these BMWs, and I don't know where we had lunch, I can't remember, but Reg Turnbull had done the route for us because Reg came from over that way, and he'd done a superb route for us. Anyway, cutting this long story short, we all eventually trudged back to the railway station in Alston, and we were loading the bikes up, and I went over to Robert and I said, I admire you two for riding those things in these conditions. I said, I thought I was an enthusiast, but I really take my hat off to you. He said, oh, it's nothing. He said, just ask Jeff what he was doing yesterday. So I went over to Jeff. I said, Robert sent me over to ask me what you were doing yesterday, Jeff. And Jeff said, well, he said, at 6 o'clock Saturday night, I was in Bristol at the BMF meeting, and I rode home through the night, and at 2 o'clock this morning, I took the wheels out and I put trials tyres on so as I could come trail riding with you today. And I just said, I don't believe this. I thought I was a motorcyclist, but I'm not. I'm just playing at it. It was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I admire them so much, those lads. Jeff in particular, because for all the work he's done as well, of course. But That's my favourite story out of all the stories, because I just couldn't believe you would do that. I'd have the enthusiasm and energy to do that. You know, he lived at Lazenby, north of Penrith, so he had a good hour's ride to the start in the morning. I don't think he got much sleep that night. Yeah, just amazing. They've ridden all over the world, those lads. You name it, they've been there. They were the first Europeans to go into Russia when the Iron Curtain came down, 1968. And they got some sponsorship from Firmenite, because Hilda, Robert's wife, worked for Firmenite, and Firmenite provided a backup van and some cash, and they rode right across Russia. First Europeans ever to do it on a motorbike in recent years. And there's a wonderful story. Jeff did a magazine article, which I've got a very poor copy of, but I've got a copy of it, about his experiences, him and Robert's experiences.
They've never mentioned that.
No, I've never heard
No, they're very modest about these things.
They are.
Yeah, they were members. It would probably be the IMTC, the international, one of these very, very international motorcycle clubs, and it was because it was that sort of organisation that they were able to get all the permissions, and I think they had escorts all through Russia.
So that's the end of part 1 of the Cumbria TRF Oral Histories. Please join us for part 2 and subsequent parts and all the other fabulous podcasts that we are going to record at some point. See you later. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.